you can go to Amazon.com, and Amazon, under their KDP, you can create an audiobook in 30 minutes.
That's true, but I would rather have a reader do it, though, and my publisher is investing in that now. But you're right. The Kindle does have an option to do that. I have an outside publisher too, so that kind of limits my own options. But I'm excited about having the reader audiobook coming out soon.
Good for you. Okay. I mean, we were going to have a team of 4 people do mine, but then once it was that easy to create, it may not be the greatest quality in the world. Yours would probably be of more quality then, because it's, you'll have varied voices and so on.
Yeah. But it's great that you're making it available for, using the Kindle setup, because there are a lot of people who have difficulty reading. If I had $1 for everyone who has asked me out an audiobook, I could take myself out to a nice dinner.
Well, we've been listening to the author of The Untold Story, and also we've been listening to Dawn Eden Goldstein, the author of Father Ed. Now, Alice, did you want to say something to us? Because we are starting the meeting, but did you want to
thank you. I just wanted to say that some of us don't have computers.
Okay. Can we get into that at the end of the meeting? Can we bring that into one of the questions at the end of the meeting? Thank you, Alice. Thank you very much. I'm going to mute everyone. If that's you, just be mindful. It's not authority I have. It's just we're doing it for the purpose of the meeting. Although I do enjoy it, I have to be honest. So my name is David. I'm alcoholic. I'm delighted to know I'm an alcoholic. If I didn't know I was alcoholic, I'd be drinking, wondering why I keep getting drunk. So it's great to have Dawn Eden Goldstein with us tonight. We're reading. We're going to be looking at her book tonight. We're going to have a presentation from Dawn, and the title of the book is Father Ed: The Story of Bill W.'s Spiritual Sponsor. They also are reading that every Sunday. If you'd want to get more, they're reading it on Sundays at let me get the time, 3 p.m. Pacific time. The Zoom ID is 849-7747-2890, and the password is 4545454. And it's on our website, growingunderstandinggroup.com. Please unmute yourselves. I think they can unmute themselves again, Rob. You've given them the power. Please unmute yourself. We're going to say a quick version of the set-aside prayer. And if you'd like to unmute yourselves, please do. Thank you very much, everyone. So God, please help me
I think I know divine and a new understanding. Open mind for new understanding. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. And we're just going to have a few moments silence to gather our thoughts, reflect on, why we're here, who was here when we got here, and think of the alcoholic who's still suffering from alcoholism. And we're also thinking, of course, of the family members. It's been a joy. Dawn, looking forward to this. Over to you, Dawn Eden Goldstein.
Thank you so much. Well, it's wonderful to have so many people here to hear about Father Ed. I'm going to, because I know there are a lot of questions, and I know we usually wrap up within an hour. I'm going to try to limit my talk to about 35 minutes or so we have as much time as possible for questions. And if you're interested in hearing a longer talk, there are definitely some talks available on YouTube, and you can also, I'm going to put my my blog address in the chat. On my blog, there's a tab for audio and video, and you can click on that tab and hear some talks, see some video interviews too. Plus, if you scroll down on my blog, I typically add videos there as well. So during this time that we have, I'm going to use I'm going to share my screen if that's all right, David. And I do have a PowerPoint. It isn't much, but it provides a few touchstones that will give you something to look at besides my adorable mug. And so let's see. I'm going to play this from the start. So here we go. So during the time we have, I'm going to give you some of the main outlines of my biography of Father Ed, namely something that I found missing in the books that previously existed that touched on him, such as, first of all, Ernie Kurtz's Not God, Ernie Kurtz's Great History of Alcoholics Anonymous, which has a significant amount of material on Father Ed. Previous books also include The Soul of Sponsorship, Robert Fitzgerald's collection of correspondence between Father Ed and Bill Wilson, and also Glenn Chestnut wrote a book that's kind of more of an extended reflection on Father Ed. And one thing that's missing from all of those books is, how did he become Father Ed? In The Soul of Sponsorship, there's maybe 2 or 4 pages on Father Ed with biographical material, but it really gives very little other than a kind of a bare bones. So the first part of my talk, I'll talk a bit more about how he became Father Ed, and then I'll share about Father Ed's encounter with AA and his encounter with Bill. And if I have a couple of minutes left after that before we go to Q&A, then I'll share some quotes from Father Ed and just something about the lasting contributions that Father Ed made to AA's spirituality. So you see here my book, which is available from Orbis. I'll be sharing a discount code at the end, but this book, Father Ed, is available from Orbis Books in hardcover, paperback, also Kindle, and I think other ebooks as well. So Father Ed, here's some quick facts about him. As you can see, he was born in 1898, died in 1960, very proudly Irish American, and very proudly a St. Louisan. Father Ed, as a child, had the nickname Puggy because of his upturned nose. And he didn't always think that he was going to be a priest. He didn't think he was going to be a priest because he liked fun too much. Not necessarily sinful fun, just fun. We're talking the first half of the 20th century, which is when he was coming of age in the especially in the 19 teens. It was long before the Second Vatican Council and a certain liberalization of views that took place in the Catholic Church. Back in the 19 teens, 1920s, the Catholic understanding of priests was what we would now call rather clericalists. Priests were considered a breed above normal mortal men, and they were expected to be in their outward presentation rather disciplined, and they were, unlike Baptist preachers, they could certainly drink, but they weren't expected to do the sort of things that young Puggy Dowling enjoyed. Puggy Dowling enjoyed staying up all night with his buddies and playing cards and playing billiards, and he liked sleeping late. He liked being able to not fuss with his hair and with his clothes. He called himself a slob. He was aware of what he was, and so he knew that priests couldn't do those things, that priests had to straighten up and fly right. And he also enjoyed sports. He enjoyed newspapers. He enjoyed politics. And none of these, things were particularly compatible with the priesthood. I want to show you a picture of Father Ed with his college baseball team. He's the captain, and you see him there, front row, center. And if you notice, Father Ed's hair is like more kind of in his face than anyone else. You see, these other men who look like they could have, young men who look like they could have just gotten out of the Marines, and there's Father Ed looking like James Dean, so he's got this terrible, 5 o'clock shadow, unlike many of the other players. He just kind of let it all hang out, and he was very happy with that. And he wasn't Father Ed at that time, of course. He was Puggy Dowling. And he was quite good at baseball, thought that he was going to do it professionally, tried out for professional baseball teams, including the St. Louis Browns and the Chicago White Sox. Didn't make it, was told he wasn't ready. And so after that, really not very long after this photograph was taken, Puggy Dowling left college, and he took a position as a reporter at a St. Louis newspaper, the Globe Democrat, and he did very well as a reporter. He loved it, really loved covering politics. But he had this nagging thought in his head that he might be called to the priesthood. And he felt that knowing who he was and what he liked, he couldn't really be called to it. But he decided that he was going to try out the Jesuits just to really confirm that he wasn't called to it. He had gone to Jesuit schools. The Jesuits seemed like a natural choice, and he felt himself drawn to them. So the next photo you see will be Father Ed with the Jesuits. So I just want to get a one last good look at this gentleman with the 5 o'clock shadow. This young man, he's 19 in this picture, with the 5 o'clock shadow and the hair in his face and sitting, very relaxed. And now the next photo you're going to see is this same young man, just, I think, maybe 2 years later, in the Jesuit novitiate. He entered in September of 1919 when he was 21. So yeah, this photo is from, it's actually from about 3 years after the baseball shot. This is Father Ed with his Jesuit novitiate class in June 2021. And Father Ed is all the way off to the left. He's the furthest person standing on the left. And I don't think I can, it's going to make, it's a little hard for me to manipulate here. But if you look at that gentleman standing all the way off to the left, you see a different kind of face than you saw in the baseball photo. He's not relaxed. He's trying to stand up straight. His hair is out of his face. And he also, whereas before with the baseball team, he was in the middle and looking very much at home, here he's as far off to the side as he can be. And he's looking self-conscious. And in fact, Puggy Dowling, upon entering the Jesuits, really went through a personal crisis. He was so sure that God wasn't really calling him to the Jesuits that he didn't even bring a trunk with him, even though the Jesuit novitiate was a 2-year tryout period before the novice would be called to make first vows. Still, Puggy Dowling thought that he was only going to be there 2 weeks before deciding it wasn't for him. So he didn't bring a trunk with him, just a change of pants. And yet once he got clothed with that cassock, he started to get the uncomfortable feeling that he really was called to that life. And it was uncomfortable because it was a very difficult life. The Jesuits then were the most disciplined of the religious orders, definitely more disciplined than even the priesthood, which was quite a bit more disciplined than today. The Jesuits were known as God's Marines, their life was a life being very serious about poverty, about chastity, about obedience, and Puggy was chafing against the requirements of such a life and the austerities of such a life. And this is when, in later times, when he would speak to AA, he would say that this was his experience of hitting bottom in the novitiate, because on the one hand, he felt that God probably was calling him to this, but on the other hand, he felt that it was really, really hard. So he felt that God was calling him to something impossible, and it made him even doubt the goodness of God. This is what I was kind of getting at before we started, when I mentioned that Father Ed remembers better than I do what it's like to be an agnostic, because there were times in the novitiate when he really couldn't even say for sure that there was a God. When he spoke to his spiritual director, the novice master asked him, "Well, can you say for sure that there is no God?" And Puggy acknowledged that he couldn't say for sure that there was no God. So his novice master said that as long as he couldn't say for sure that there wasn't a God, that he had enough faith to continue with the novitiate until it came time to decide to make first vows. One thing that really helped Puggy in the novitiate was making the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola. So the spiritual exercises, as written by St. Ignatius, who was the founder of the Jesuits, they're a 30-day series of prayers and meditations. They can be done by shorter means, but that's the classic way. And each Jesuit novice makes this 30-day retreat. In this case, the entire novitiate class made it together. That's how it's normally done still. And when Puggy was making the spiritual exercises, these were prayers where the exercises invite the person making them to really kind of put themselves in the picture in the Gospels, in the stories of Jesus and Mary and the apostles. And through putting himself in the picture, the person making the retreats is invited to think about what is God calling him or her to do, and to finally make that decision and make that leap of faith, knowing that God is helping the person to make that leap of faith, to follow their calling. So Puggy was very helped by these exercises, but even so, though, he wasn't able to make that leap of faith to accept his calling in the Jesuits until very much like at the end, at the 11th hour, literally the night before he was to make his first vows. He finally decided that he would do it, and he, because of making the decision at the last minute, he took for his vow saint, which is some saint's name that Jesuits take on occasion of making their first vows. He took as his vow saint Saint Dismas, Dismas is the name that the Catholic Church gives to the good thief, the thief who crucified next to Jesus, said to Jesus, "Remember me, Lord, when you enter into your kingdom." Puggy Dowling really felt like he could relate to the good thief because he stole paradise at the last minute. He got in just under the wire by delaying his decision on his vows. Once he made that decision and made the vows, he felt great consolation, I'm going to skip now to a photo of him 10 years, 11 years later, where you can see him the year that he met Father Ed met Bill Wilson. Here he is in his office at the Queenswork in St. Louis, which was a Jesuit publishing house where he worked. Now, you'll notice that Father Ed, who by this point was ordained almost just about 9 years, you'll notice that in this photo, Father Ed is bent over. And if you notice his hands, they look arthritic. And the story behind Father Ed's being bent over actually begins a few weeks after he made his first vows in the Jesuits. When he was just 23 years old, he was taking a walk with a fellow Jesuit, and he felt a pang, a twinge of pain in one of his legs. And ultimately, 10 years later, by the time Father Ed was ordained in 1931, or a little after that, actually, he received the diagnosis that it was incurable ankylosing spondylitis. I mean, ankylosing spondylitis is incurable. For some time before that, the doctors weren't able to discern whether it was curable or not. But eventually, they told him that it was degenerative and that it would ultimately kill him, basically, because it was causing his joints to calcify and his bones to calcify. So that's why you see Father Ed now here at the age of 41 in his office. In this picture, you see him bent because by then his spine had calcified. He used to joke that he was becoming his own tombstone. And you'll also notice that Father Ed's hair here is white. He got prematurely gray, probably likewise having to do with his illness, because otherwise he's just 41 here. It's interesting in that Bill Wilson, when describing his first meeting with Father Ed, which was this same year of 1940 when this photo was taken, Bill describes Father Ed at their first meeting as being the old man, this old priest, I think is how he calls him, this old priest. Now, Father Ed was 3 years younger than Bill, but he seemed so old because of his disability. So you see Father Ed here in this picture in his office at the Queenswork, which, as I may have mentioned, was a Jesuit publishing house in St. Louis. Before Father Ed encountered AA, he had a reputation for being a priest for people with problems. Because I think largely because of the emotional and spiritual trials that he had as a young Jesuit, he really identified with people who were going through any kind of crisis, and he loved being present for people in crisis. So it happened that in January 1940, or I'm not sure if I have my exact dates right. It might have actually been December 1939, but right around January of 1940, Father Ed was contacted because there was a nun in Chicago who knew of his magic that he could work with helping people with seemingly insoluble problems. And this nun told him that a friend of his who was a reporter in Chicago was suffering from terrible alcoholism. I've interviewed this reporter's daughter, and she gave me permission to breach his anonymity. The reporter was named Edwin Leahy, and I have a photo of Edwin Leahy that I can show you in the next slide here. That is an autographed photo of Edwin Leahy. I typed out what the signature says. And Leahy, at the time that Father Ed was called upon to help him, his alcoholism had gotten so bad that he was on the verge of losing his job at the Chicago Daily News, and his wife Grace had taken their 2 baby girls to her family in Texas. And so when this nun contacted Father Ed and said, "You've got to help Leahy because his alcoholism is out of control," Father Ed did what anyone who knew him could have expected he would do. He was able to get Ed Leahy and his wife Grace into his office, Father Ed's office in St. Louis, and he was able to extract from Ed Leahy a promise that he wouldn't drink anymore. And then Father Ed sent the couple back to Chicago. And at that time, all Father Ed could do was just, urge Leahy not to drink anymore, because Father Ed didn't know about AA. We're talking now January 1940, and AA only existed in a few places at that time. This was before Jack Alexander's article came out. I'm not sure, but it might even have been before the Liberty magazine article came out. Certainly, it was at a time when the Big Book was quite new, and AA had yet to have a chapter in St. Louis, although that would certainly change by the end of the year once Father Ed discovered AA. So Father Ed discovered AA through Ed Leahy. Father Ed came up to Chicago about a month after reuniting Ed Leahy with his wife, and when he came to visit Chicago, he visited the Leahys, and he was very happy to find that Ed Leahy was still not drinking, but he was concerned to hear that Leahy was going to these meetings with his old drinking buddies, people from the Chicago Daily News, people whose names are familiar to AA historians, such as Luke H. and Clem L. And so Father Ed was worried to hear that Leahy was hanging out with his old drinking buddies in this group with this strange name of Alcoholics Anonymous. So Leahy invited Father Ed to come to a meeting. And when Father Ed came in, I believe offhand it was late February 1940. I have what I believe is around the exact date in my book. When Father Ed came to the meeting, once people started to tell their stories, Father Ed was just blown away. It was an experience for him as though he were in the catacombs of ancient Rome with underground Christians. It was a kind of an early church experience, like experiencing the presence of the Holy Spirit, the way that Father Ed imagined the Holy Spirit was active in the early church. It was a profound kind of conversion for him. He was already Catholic, of course, but he was at that meeting converted to appreciating the power of AA and the fellowship and the 12 steps. He took a big book. He purchased a big book and took it with him back to St. Louis. And when he showed it to a fellow Jesuit named Father John Marcoux, this Jesuit pointed out to Father Ed that certain principles in the 12 steps were similar to principles in the spiritual exercises. And at that, Father Ed became really intrigued because he had always wanted to somehow find a way to spread the principles of the spiritual exercises to the general public, because he felt that principles in the exercises could help anyone who wanted to break a bad habit and develop virtue. So once he realized that the 12 steps contained these same principles that he had so admired from the spiritual exercises, he had to find the author of the spiritual exercises. So he first went to Akron, met Dr. Bob, but when he started to ask about whether St. Ignatius Loyola was a factor in the development of the 12 steps, Dr. Bob just recommended he go to Bill, and so Father Ed went to Bill at the AA Clubhouse in New York one night in November 1940. I believe the next photo will be Father Ed with Bill in 1944. So Bill, in introducing Father Ed in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, tells something about what that first meeting was like for him when Father Ed came up to see him at the clubhouse. Bill was in a really lousy mood. He was on what he would later describe as a dry drunk. And Bill was frustrated because he had had these thousands of copies of the big book printed, and most of them were just gathering dust in a warehouse because AA hadn't taken off. Jack Alexander had started coming to meetings at the clubhouse with Bill by that point, but Jack at that time just thought that he was being hoaxed. He thought he was being punked because the clubhouse was in Midtown Manhattan. What else is in Midtown Manhattan? Broadway actors. So here's this reporter from the Saturday Evening Post who Bill's hoping would be, Bill's ticket to getting AA national publicity. And this reporter is clearly not believing what he's seeing. In fact, Jack Alexander wouldn't be fully convinced of AA working until he saw the St. Louis AA at the tail end of Jack's tour of AA chapters. So Father Ed was, in a certain sense, important in the opening of Jack Alexander's mind to AA. But with regard to that first meeting at the clubhouse, Father Ed sat himself down next to Bill, who was lying on top of his bed with an imaginary ulcer. And Father Ed said to Bill, "I'm very interested in the connections between your 12 steps and the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius Loyola." And Bill responded grouchily, "Never heard of him." And Father Ed laughed. And you can see there the shared joy in this photo between Father Ed and Bill when they were having dinner years later. Their first moment of shared joy was when Father Ed laughed and Bill looked over at him. And Bill said afterwards that that there seemed to be this light radiating from Father Ed's face, that were emanating from his face, that seemed to gradually fill the room. Bill described it as like a presence. It's interesting. There are 3 times in Bill's life where he described feeling that presence with a capital P. The first was at Winchester Cathedral when he visited it as a young soldier during World War I. The second time Bill said he experienced that presence was at Towns Hospital during what is nicknamed Bill's hot flash, his spiritual experience. And then the third time he experienced that presence was with Father Ed. And so that was when Bill found himself taking the fifth with Father Ed. You might say, well, Bill wrote the 12 steps. Wouldn't he have made his 5th step? But the answer, interestingly enough, is that given the origins of AA spirituality in the Oxford group, and given that Bill himself attained sobriety really through that spiritual experience and then through his he maintained his sobriety through his 12th step work of reaching out to other alcoholics. Bill, although he had written the 12 steps, he really hadn't made them in order. As many of you know, the 12 steps were in a certain way crowdsourced by Bill from the first 100 members of AA, and then in 20 minutes, he said he put them all down one evening. So it was really in that encounter with Father Ed that Bill made his 5th step. And from then on, Bill referred to Father Ed as his spiritual sponsor. And even though Father Ed wasn't a sponsor in the way that EBT was a sponsor, Father Ed helped Bill to really understand and live this spirituality that Bill had encapsulated in the 12 steps. So they remained, Bill and Father Ed remained very close for the next 20 years until Father Ed's death. I want to get to questions, but I think there's one slide that has a few of the sayings that Father Ed had that helped people. This is from an article written by a Protestant reporter who was a friend of Father Ed's. So here you see a few of Father Ed's sayings, very gentle sayings. Father Ed, he ministered to people no matter what their religion or no religion. He didn't try to push people into any faith. He certainly was a Catholic priest, and he prayed privately that people he cared about would become Catholic. But he was very, very gentle and met people where they were. I've got one more slide here that has the discount code that I mentioned. So that discount code, as you can see, is FRE23. And if you go to, I'll put it in the text box here. This is for U.S. customers. If you go to orbisbooks.com and you use the code FRE23, you can get 30% off your order of Father Ed. So I'm going to stop sharing now. There's much more that I can say, but I would rather share in response to your questions during the time that we have left. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dawn Egan-Gorstein. But please unmute yourselves.
Thank you so very much.
So much, Dawn. That was wonderful.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Thank you,
Dawn.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great. Beautiful presentation, John. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Very nice.
Thank you all.
Like a wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Great night.
I've learned so much. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad. Thank you. David, would you like to moderate the questions?
Yes, I will do that. Just first, I want to just bring to people's attention about what we have coming up on Sunday and that, and then we'll come back to you, Dawn, if that's all right. Sure. You have a nice cup of tea for yourself there. Just have thank you, Pepperson. Rob, do you want to do this? Rob, do you want to jump in there and mention?
I would love to, David. On Sunday, come and join us for Challenging the Creation Myths.
I muted for you, Rob. Go ahead. And just unmute yourself as well, Rob. Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Rob. You got it, Rob? You just have to unmute yourself and you're good.
I've done that. Sorry, David. Come join us on Sunday at 11:30 Eastern Daylight Time for writing the big book, Challenging the Creation Myths. And we'll have Jim Worley reading, and also we will have Gigi doing the footnotes. So come on out and join us.
Thank you. And Bill Sherberg, who normally does this with us, is away this weekend. We've been going through writing the big book, The Creation of AA, with him. This is a recorded presentation. Next week we have Patrick O'Dea going to give us a talk on, what's Patrick going to talk to us on, Rob? Do you recall what that was?
Oh, I certainly can. Why do I always forget this? The 24-hour book.
The 24-hour book. The man who wrote the 24-hour book.
That's
Who knows?
right.
Right. That's next week. And then just quickly before we go back to Dawn, next month, what we have coming up for you, we have people booked up to August actually. So we got Sam Shoemaker, Tom Finnegan is going to do. Then we have a beautiful presentation on benign anarchy, Alcoholics Anonymous in Ireland with Shane Butler. Professor Shane Butler is coming along. And then we're really excited about this because we have Gary Neihart here with us every Thursday. And Gary has been teasing us with this new information he's found on Bill and Belladonna. And maybe, Gary, if you are listening still, maybe you could jump in here and tell us a little bit about that. But we've moved Gary way up to fast-tracked him up to May 17th. And he's going to tell us all about that. And then, Gary...
Yeah, just keep those cards and letters coming. All I can say is that through the research that I've been doing, and I'm going to suggest that you show up because you haven't. It's a presentation I hadn't heard before, and this is rather new information that's been around for a while, but I sure didn't know about it. So anyway, about Bill's hot flash, and that has a tendency to be a bit controversial in terms of how that came about. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Gary Neihart, and thank you for all you do. We love you reading your book, Bobby B, The Untold Story. So let's come back to tonight, and we've got beautiful stuff, Dawn. That was wonderful. Thank you. We got Chris. Hello, Chris. How you doing? Good to see you, sir.
Hi.
All right. Hello.
Chris.
Thank you, Dave, to allow me to pose a question. Dawn, nice to see you. Briefly, I know you didn't have a lot of time in your presentation to cover the 20 years of relationships that Bill and Father Ed enjoyed after that November meeting. But if you could, in kind of synopsis form, I guess, talk about Father Ed's role in helping Bill craft the traditions and the 12 concepts, the writing that Bill did that was so important through the 40s and 50s.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you, and I'm happy to talk about that. When I wrote Father Ed and I was examining the interactions between Father Ed and Bill with regard to what you're describing, the traditions and the concepts, what I found was that on the one hand, it's notable for what Father Ed contributed, and on the other hand, it's interesting to see where Father Ed drew the line and did not offer assistance. So with regard to how he contributed, anything that didn't relate to like internal governance, he was happy to help with. So with the whole question of, I think it's the eighth tradition, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the tradition with regard to that, AAs don't receive payment for 12th step work, but can receive payment for special services. That came directly out of a conversation that Bill had with Father Ed when Bill and Lois were having money issues and were trying to determine whether Bill should take a paid position that had been offered him. And it was Father Ed who really provided him with this kind of solution whereby in Bill's case, Bill would receive his funding from the royalties from the Big Book, and the again, forgive me if my numbering's off, but the eighth tradition came from that. But there was another case where Bill was planning the third legacy and how it would relate to the governance of AA, and he asked Father Ed for specific help with that because he knew that Father Ed was an internationally known expert on participatory democracy, specifically proportional representation, which you sometimes hear about now under the name ranked choice voting. Bill had really benefited from his conversations with Father Ed about democracy in general. But when Bill asked Father Ed specifically for advice on the third legacy and on governance, Father Ed said that is something that should be discussed within AA. And there were other times too, including one that I talk about in my biography of Father Ed, where Father Ed was asked, like by AAs, to interfere in governance, and he wouldn't. That was in the case of his friend Joe Diggles, who wanted Father Ed to lay down a heavy hand to kind of push the Chicago AA to admit African Americans. And Father Ed said, well, Bill Wilson and I are in agreement that AA's spirituality would benefit exponentially if Black members were admitted. But Father Ed said that as far as saying anything to anyone other than Joe Diggles, who was approaching him about it, Father Ed couldn't do that because he had to respect those boundaries, that AA's members are the ones who have the say. So that was something that I really appreciated about him, knowing when to speak and when to be silent. So thank you for asking.
Thank you, Chris. I just quickly, Marie in the chat says that she loved it. Is there a way to get this book from Toronto, Ontario, Canada?
Yes, there is, and I just have to double check the that last slide.
Yep.
Let's see. It looks like North America. It looks like the Orbis Books website. You can use the Orbis Books website if it's North America. There are other distributors if it's outside the country. I'm going to take a screenshot of my screen with this information, and I'll put that into the chat as we speak, so that people can see that. Let's see. I'm going into the chat. And here we go. Let's go to Thomas Nias. Good to see you, Thomas. As always.
Good to hear from you again, Don. I had a question in regards to you go through the process where Father Ed gets on this journey where he's trying to track down the author of the 12 Steps.
Yes.
And he specifically, he actually had a meeting scheduled in Springfield, Massachusetts, and then he took another day or two to go to New York City.
That's right.
To meet Bill Wilson.
That's correct.
All right. My question is that you just kind of theorized that he may have stayed at a Jesuit community house at St. Francis Xavier High School in New York.
Yes.
Have you ever run across anything that would suggest that Bill Wilson had a relationship or a friendship with Jack Alexander's brother, Calvert Alexander, who the Alexanders grew up, were born in St. Louis, educated there. His brother Calvert was ordained a Jesuit priest in 1929. His brother Calvert then ended up in New York City and was editor of a Jesuit mission magazine, just like Father Ed was with the Queen's Work in St. Louis. It just seems that they have a lot of parallel interest and also backgrounds.
That's a fascinating question. Well, if you could please email me about that, I want to explore that. So one thing I can check is that I'm able to check with the records to see where Calvert Alexander would have been living in New York. So I'd be interested to know, whether Father Ed actually stayed at the same house as Father Calvert Alexander, if Father Calvert Alexander was living in New York in 1940. So that would be something I'd want to explore. One thing I can tell you is that Father Ed's superior at the Queen's Work, Father Daniel A. Lord, S.J., had been the either high school or college teacher of Jack Alexander. I'd have to double check which one. But definitely, Jack had been Jesuit educated, and Father Daniel A. Lord knew Jack well. So Jack was really from Father Ed's world, both with regard to the Jesuits, but also with regard to reporters. And as I share in Father Ed, given that Father Ed was the kind of the main actor in bringing together alcoholics in St. Louis to form the first AA chapter, and so given that there were very likely journalist friends of Father Ed in the first AA chapter in St. Louis, Father Ed's influence on the first St. Louis chapter would have really helped with regard to Jack Alexander's experience when he came to the St. Louis AA and found his old drinking buddies from the newspaper who were members. So thank you for that question.
So Dawn's email is in the chat. It's dawneden.blogspot.com.
Oh, that's my blog. I'll put my email in. My email is dawneden@gmail.com. There, I just put it in.
Thank you, Dawn. dawneden@gmail.com. Al L is waiting. Thank you, Al. Good opportunity to see you, sir. There you go.
Thank you. Dawn, great presentation. So I think I've read where on their spiritual journey, they both took LSD together.
Not true. Actually, not true. I was able to debunk that.
Okay, go ahead. Can you tell me more about that?
Okay, so I have a chapter on that in Father Ed. It's the chapter called Sponsor and Protector towards the end of the book. The only quote unquote evidence, or the only proofs that's been offered for Father Ed taking LSD were that first Bill wrote this really optimistic letter where he said, like, Father Ed watched an experiment and was interested and, expressed openness to taking it himself. And you have to kind of keep in mind that this is the same Bill Wilson who was saying Lois took LSD and she had a great experience. And Lois herself, when asked about it, said, I didn't feel a thing. So, Bill was just kind of on fire with enthusiasm, saying like, oh yeah, well, Father Ed expressed openness. But other than that, there's actually no evidence. And in fact, the evidence that I found was that Father Ed is repeatedly warning Bill against it, not with a heavy hand, but he's saying kind of in Father Ed's kind of oblique way, or gentle way. He says like something like, well, I wonder if these aren't like the spirits in Macbeth that tell us what we want to hear, something like that. I forget the exact words that he uses. I have the exact words in my book. But if Father Ed had in fact taken LSD, then his letters to Bill would have said, well, my experience was such and such. But the fact that Father Ed makes no reference in any of these letters that were written after what would have been that experience, and the fact that there is no other evidence other than just Bill saying that Father Ed expressed openness. I think we have to conclude that Father Ed didn't. I also interviewed Father Ed's niece and nephew and just many people who know him, and nobody said they ever took it. So, that was a myth I was happy to put to bed. There are some other uncomfortable things about Father Ed that I did, discover that I talk about, like like that, Father Ed went to a rally of the Charles Lindbergh group that was against going into World War II. He eventually dropped out of that group, which is a good thing because that group was anti-Semitic, which was definitely not Father Ed's thing. So, I mean, I'm not afraid to say things about Father Ed that are, unflattering if they come up. But that was one thing where I just couldn't find, the evidence just wasn't there. Thank you.
Wonderful stuff. And just on myths, we're reading, we have Bill Schaberg, the author, writing the big book, The Creation of AI, on Sunday with us, and he's going to be reading chapter 1 of his marvelous book, Challenging the Creation Myths. So, stick around. We've got Mela Kircher, I hope I pronounced that right, in Ohio. You close to Akron? How you doing?
No, I'm not. I'm close to Chris, but not Akron's 2 hours away. So it doesn't take long to get there. Yes, my question really had to do back in the earlier part of Father Ed Dowling's life, when he decided to join the priesthood. That was during World War I.
That's right.
So I just wondered if the World War had any impact on his thoughts for joining the priesthood.
That's a great question, and there's some interesting information about that. I saw your question in the chat, so I'm glad that this came up. I know we're getting close to the end of the time, so I'll speak very quickly. But I do talk a good deal in Father Ed about how what Father Ed was doing during World War I. So it seems that he first tried to enter the Jesuits in 1918, but that was when a lot of men were trying to get in to avoid military service.
Oh.
So, it does seem as though that was one of the things on young Puggy Dowling's mind, but he was actually turned away at that point because of them being flooded with incoming people. So what he decided instead was to do a kind of a student army training corps, as it was called, kind of like an ROTC type thing at St. Louis University. So he spent like 2 months as a private in the student army training corps, and really hated it. Definitely, army discipline was not for him. And then after the war ended, he tried again to enter the Jesuits, and that was when he succeeded.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Dawn, can you just tell us some of the table of contents in your book? Can you just tell us what the chapter titles are?
Yes, sure thing. So part 1 is a spiritual father in the making. So as one priest who read the book said, it takes like 90 pages for Father Ed to get ordained. So I begin, the first 7 chapters cover his childhood in Baden, Missouri, and his high school, his college, his life as a soldier, his life as a newspaper journalist, and then his Jesuit formation, which is the longest period of formation in like any religious order of the church. And then part 2, so that's the first 7 chapters. Then part 2 is a priest for people with problems, and that's chapters 8 through 13. And so part 2 is where, on page 121, that's where we begin with the story of how he found AA. And then this whole section is really about Father Ed's discovery of AA and how he really got on fire with the 12 steps, wanting to bring them to everyone, not just alcoholics. And then part 3, a servant until the end. That's chapters 14 through 17. And there, I talk more about, I have some more like firsthand stories of people who were accompanied and helped by Father Ed. Since Father Ed died in 1960, the stories that I have of accompaniment are from people who were accompanied like in the 1950s. So I was very glad to get a number of stories like that. And then it goes up to the very end of his life and his wake, which was attended by Bill. I have a story about Bill at the wake and Father Ed's funeral as well. So it's pretty comprehensive, and it comes to just over 300 pages of text, plus about 50 pages of notes and an index.
Thank you, Dawn. Dawn, are you okay if we do the next 3 questions? Is that okay with you? Are you okay?
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Terry, for waiting. Appreciate it. Terry, back up to you.
My name is Joe. I'd like to thank Dawn for her presentation. My question is, did Father Ed help Bill W. with his depression?
Yes, that was definitely an area where Father Ed helped Bill a great deal. Bill really said, and I mean, I think this is in the Robert, I'm forgetting his last name, but the biography of Bill that was done by first name Robert and what's the last name? Anyone know?
Thompson.
Thompson. Yes, thank you. Yes. So Robert Thompson, who if I remember correctly, spoke directly, interviewed Bill directly, and also had access to other recordings, said that Bill really couldn't describe what Father Ed did for him. Even in their first meeting, Father Ed helped Bill to see that there was that there was meaning in Bill's thirst. That what had happened was Bill had this great thirst for drink, and then he redirected his thirst into thirst for AA to take off, and then he became frustrated when AA didn't take off as he expected. And Father Ed in that first meeting quoted the Beatitudes to him, saying, "Blessed are they who hunger and thirst." And the message that Father Ed gave Bill was that Bill's thirst was a gift. And the question was, where was he going to direct his thirst? As long as Bill was directing his thirst at something other than his higher power and God's will for him, Bill was always going to be dissatisfied. But if Bill just kept seeking to do the will of his higher power in the moment, then Bill would be able to find joy even amid his dissatisfaction. Father Ed was very clear that Bill wasn't going to be fully satisfied in this life, but I believe that he impressed upon Bill that in Bill's 12th step work, that Bill would find some joy in his encounter with each person, with each alcoholic. And there's definitely more in Father Ed with regard to how Father Ed helped Bill, how Father Ed encouraged Bill. So thank you for asking about that.
Thank you. And Bernadette is in Ontario.
Hi, Bernadette.
Thank you. Thank you, Dawn. It's absolutely wonderful. I love the personalized stories of the individuals who gave us life here. And I did want to ask one simple question, but several other complicated maybe. How tall was Father Ed?
Oh, okay. I believe he was about 5'8". He wasn't that tall. He had been a catcher in baseball, and I think that may also be a reason why the nickname Puggy stuck, because catchers were sometimes called Pug because of being like kind of kind of, stocky or very muscular build, and Father Ed was built perfectly for that.
They were quite a match. Bill apparently and Dr. Bob were 6'4". So yes, it's so the other. I want to find out. Father Ed often talked about their comparable addictions between he and Father Ed, or maybe it was Father Ed that talked about that. Also would like to know the cause of death, Father Ed's cause of death, his diagnosis, where did he die, and was Bill at the funeral?
Okay, so that's a lot of questions. I'm going to answer the first one quickly, but that's because I go at length in my book. So Father Ed was addicted to cigarettes, and he overcame that addiction with the help of the 12 steps. He also drew upon 12-step spirituality in losing weight, although he was ultimately unsuccessful with keeping the weight off. His illness made it very hard for him to get the kind of exercise that's also necessary to metabolize well. And with regard to Father Ed had a fear of flying that he overcame with principles that he learned from a group called Recovery Incorporated, which is now called Recovery International. That's a group for people with nervous disorders. So with regard to his cause of death, officially it was a heart attack. There was not an autopsy. I inquired with the doctor to see if maybe Father Ed might have had some blood clot because he had flown earlier in the day, or the previous day. But the doctor I spoke with said that it was unlikely that there would have been a blood clot, and that given Father Ed's ankylosing spondylitis and given his heart issues, that alone would have been enough to kill him. And yes, Bill was at the wake and at the funeral for Father Ed. So thank you for asking, and I just have to say I love your hat. Just love it. Thank you.
I love the story that you're telling. It's just so detailed and so exciting. And yes, I have the book.
Oh, thank you,
Dawn.
And we've got Ken Mack, MC. Hello, Ken.
Hi, Ken.
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for your presentation, Dawn. And I'm in Columbia, Missouri. So are you in St. Louis, or are you outside of St. Louis?
I'm in Washington, D.C., but I've spent some time in St. Louis.
Okay, so you probably won't be able to answer my other questions then, but I'm only 2 hours away. For those who don't know, I'm 2 hours east of St. Louis, and I've been to St. Louis many times. Unfortunately, I have a drinking history in St. Louis, but anyway, when I lived there for several years. But I heard a really good presentation about this, and it didn't mention you, but it did mention Father Dowling and, a bunch of facts or whatever. And I just, what you've, I'm really piqued because you only had like 30 minutes to share, what you shared. And then there's so much, and then there was so much in that presentation that was not talked about at all today, although it was kind of hinted at it a couple of times. And I really want to come to St. Louis, and there's a archive, like different places have AA archives. And so I want to go, one of my questions is that's why I asked you whether you're in St. Louis, but no.
Oh, yes. Well, Carl B is the archivist there, yes. And he's wonderful. So I highly recommend getting in touch with Carl B. And
yes, I have. I've met him on Zoom, just like here, but he was in St. Louis, and then somebody else from St. Louis was in Columbia that day or whatever. But no, yes, I plan on coming and seeing. I guess you've already seen it all, and would have needed that in order to do what you did. But what you just revealed about Father Dowling in regard to his cigarette addiction, it's, for me, LSD was mentioned earlier. And, one thing that I'm pretty sure about is that was an early stage where, it was a pediatric or they were experimenting with it. It was like a what do you call them what everybody takes nowadays, the like Prozac and all that kind of stuff. And so it was not like LSD that I took when I went to rock concerts back in the day. So completely two different things. And for me, the reason I feel that Bill had issues with that, and once I heard you say that Father Dowling had quit smoking, I really feel Bill's real problem was smoking. And so, and it's interesting that, of course, back in the day, people didn't realize what we do today. But no, just thank you so much for your presentation. And do you have much about that smoking part of Ed Dowling in there? Or is that just
I don't have a whole lot about it, but I certainly have something about it. And his friend Joe Diggle wanted to start a group called Nicotinic Nobodies.
That's cool. I'd love to hear about that. Thanks. Anyway, thanks so much.
Yeah, I know we said you had 3, but Al is trying to sneak in a question here. Al, I have to shift it over to Dawn to give Dawn. Al, you've got the nod there from Dawn. Go ahead, Al.
Dawn, did Father Dowling do recordings that were on LPs?
Yes, he did. So I assume you probably already know about the recording that's widely available of him at the Alcoholics Anonymous 1955 convention. That's available on YouTube and at Recovery Speakers. But beyond that, Father Ed did make, there was a posthumous recording that was released of recording, or rather a posthumous album that was released of recordings that were made in the 1940s of him speaking to married couples. He doesn't speak about alcoholism on that, but it's very much the same kind of person, the same sense of humor that you hear in his AA convention talk. I'm planning to put that album of his talks to married couples online. I've got it digitized, and I just need to get around to doing it. Beyond that, at the Maryville University library in St. Louis, where they have the Dowling archive, they have radio transcript recordings. You can't play them on an ordinary record player. They have to be played on a special player. They're like 16 RPM. Those have not yet been digitized. There's a whole stack of them, which include radio shows of Father Ed talking about mostly topics related to his marriage ministry, the Cana Conference. But I think there's at least one where there's also some talk about alcohol. And I've been trying to get Maryville University to digitize them. I'm actually planning to put Maryville in touch with the Library of Congress to try to persuade them to donate those recordings to the Library of Congress, because otherwise those records could just melt and we'd never hear them. So hopefully, with the help of your good thoughts to your higher power, hopefully we can convince Maryville University to either digitize those or to donate them to a library that will. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. And Dawn, as host here this evening, I get to ask a question that hasn't been asked. So I just want to bring it up on the screen for you, because I was really impressed when I was reading this. So what kind of guidance did Father Dowling give to Bill Wilson that he was enabled him to bring this message of AA to international prominence? That's big stuff here we're talking. It
is big stuff. First of all, there's, as I mentioned, just with regard to Father Ed being so gung-ho with AA that he helped to start the St. Louis chapter, which was the chapter that ultimately convinced Jack Alexander. But beyond that, Father Ed was the first person to really loudly and continually say that these 12 steps weren't just for alcoholics, that they're for everybody. And Father Ed also was speaking to clergy of all different faiths, encouraging them to really look into AA. I think Bill even talks about this when he says that, I think this might have been at the 1955 conference. It's possible I might be confusing this with something Bill said about someone else. But I think that Bill said of Father Ed that Father Ed was saying, AA is good, come and get it, or something like that to clergy. Even if I'm wrong about Bill making that specific quote with respect to Father Ed, I have like clipping after clipping after clipping of Father Ed speaking to clergy, and so many different letters of like clergy writing to Father Ed and Father Ed writing to them, and just spreading the word to people of all faiths. And Father Ed was not one to limit himself to contact just within the Catholic world. I mean, even from like 1933, when he was just beginning his public speaking, he was speaking at social justice events where it would be, a priest, a rabbi, and a minister, and Father Ed would be the one who was the priest speaking. One of his closest friends in the religious world was Rabbi, I think his first name was Ferdinand Isserman, Isserman, whom Father Ed was friends with for longer than Father Ed knew Bill, really from 1933 to Father Ed's death. And so, at a time when people in the clergy were thinking that AA seemed like some sort of cult because it was claiming to be a spiritual program, Father Ed was the one who was reassuring clergy that AA wouldn't change whatever religion someone was in. It would just help a person who, if they had a faith, it would help them to go get more deeply into the faith they had.
Thank you. Let's hear one more time for Dawn Eden Goldstein. Thank you, Dawn, we really appreciate your efforts.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Great
Thank you,
presentation.
Informative.
Thanks.
Thanks again for another great meeting.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dawn.
Good work.
Thank you, Dawn. Dawn, will you lead us out with a manner of your choosing? It can be a poem, it can be a song. You can sing a song if you wish, or it can be a prayer. It's up to you, whichever you choose. Maybe she's jumped. Did she jump? She jumped. I think she's gone. Anyway, she's gone. I think she's gone on us. Maybe she thought that was the end of it.
Yes, she didn't want to thank.
Well, she got all the thanks. Well done, everyone. We relay people here. I'll stop recording.